it's all under this particular law that gives them authority to basically update efficiency standards for all kinds of things: pool heaters, light bulbs, gas stoves in this case. And so that does totally fall under the administration's climate change and energy agenda. And
welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by Energy and Environment Reporter Jeremy Beaman. Jeremy, talk a little bit about this new EPA power plant rule.
Well, it was introduced, draft rule was introduced a few weeks ago, and there haven't been any legal challenges filed against it yet. Mm-hmm. A rule of this magnitude, you can always expect legal challenges, especially during this day and age. There haven't been any yet, but we're starting to see sort of preliminarily some of the arguments that are going to be leveled against the rule the Biden administration put out. And folks who lead this litigation probably going to be Republican-led states, especially West Virginia. Patrick Morrisey, the AG there, has successfully challenged the Obama-era rule, which the Supreme Court ruled on last year. And so it's all going to be sort of brought up again. Is this a major question, which the Supreme Court basically said the way that Obama's Clean Power Plan was written is a major question under the major questions doctrine, meaning basically it's too big for an agency to decide with the regulation. So that's one argument that's certainly going to be brought up. The other really important piece is it sort of hinges on the technology that EPA based its standards upon: carbon capture and sequestration. And this is a technology that is out there. It's used sort of minimally so far at industrial facilities and some power plants, a very small scale, to capture the greenhouse gas emissions that come out of the facility. And the idea is to capture them, sequester them, transport them away, keep them from going into the atmosphere, and keeping them from exacerbating climate change. Well, it's not a technology used at really large scale. And so EPA said that it is a technology that's going to be ready to go at scale for when these rules kick in, and others have challenged that assessment, that notion.
So you mentioned a little earlier that there are going to be some legal challenges to this, most likely. Hasn't it been a recurring theme of the Biden administration that they try to do things through the EPA, they try to do things through regulation, and they're being told frequently by the courts that these are really things that are within the purview of Congress?
Right, and the biggest loss so far really has been, as far as a court decision dictating what the administration could do, was the case I mentioned. It didn't rule on the Biden administration's power plant rule, but it did sort of govern where they could go with it. Now, the Biden administration has said we're comfortable, we think that this can stand up against that precedent. But also the Sackett decision, which we talked about a few weeks ago, and this is the one around the waters of the United States, which said, previous definition had been too broad. Again, this was not a ruling particularly on the Biden rule, but it's probably going to, once the sort of legal processes work out, the Biden rule is very likely going to be struck down under this Sackett precedent because of the way, how broadly it swept in defining which waters can be regulated by the federal government.
So the gas stoves issue is heating up again. Obviously, the substance of the matter has been somewhat upstaged by infighting among House Republicans. But the whole idea of a gas stove ban, Republicans say they're trying to prevent one. Biden administration says they're not really implementing one anytime soon, at least. What are really the facts here?
Well, the Biden administration and other Dems are saying Republicans are under an illusion, perhaps, and some of them making jokes about perhaps they've been inhaling too much natural gas over the cooktop, and it's messing up their thinking. The Biden administration has proposed taking some gas stove models off the market because they wouldn't meet certain efficiency regulations that the Department of Energy in particular has proposed. So that's one sort of one instrument, that the administration has sought to use to. What they say is, their framing of the regulation is we want to make stoves more efficient, save consumers money, and cut greenhouse gas emissions. Republicans have seen that as basically banning or restricting consumers' use of gas stoves, and they've kind of swept widely, and they're pitching it as a protect gas stoves campaign. And the administration has responded to that by saying, look, we're not going to touch anybody's stove. This is just about energy efficiency. But it is part of the Biden administration has recorded more than 100 rules that they've either proposed or finalized on energy efficiency regulations, and it's all under this particular law that gives them authority to basically update efficiency standards for all kinds of things: pool heaters, light bulbs, gas stoves in this case. And so that does totally fall under the administration's climate change and energy agenda, and it's something they're pushing on gas stoves as well.
But I mean, it's always controversial whenever there's any regulation that touches appliances, whether they're talking about toilets, we're talking about light bulbs, now we're talking about gas stoves. These things have always triggered a certain amount of backlash.
Yeah, and in each of these rules, the department gives estimates, basically, of how much it's going to cost, what it's going to cost manufacturers to comply, and a lot of the times, the savings, if you break them down like by on a consumer basis, people are saving like $30 or something, $40 on over the life of an appliance under the proposed stove regulations, if I remember. They're fairly minimal, but if you add the whole country up, it's in the billions. And so again, it's sort of a framing thing where Republicans will say, look, I'm only going to save $30 on this, and you're going to not let me buy this model, whereas the White House, the Biden administration, saying, yeah, but in aggregate we're saving $1 billion. So it's a kind of it becomes a messaging battle, really. But they are in a sense cracking down on them. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So just too many cooks in the kitchen in Washington?
Yeah, I guess so.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks.
You can read Jeremy and subscribe to our Daily on Energy newsletter at washingtonexaminer.com.